Are you stuck relying on a grid or painstaking measuring or an underdrawing to get the likeness right, only to step back and feel like your portrait still looks stiff? You're not alone. I've been there too, obsessing over proportions and trying to control every little detail down to the eyelash, and still ending up with a portrait that just feels lifeless. And that's more than just frustrating. When your work looks technically accurate but lacks that expressive spark, well, it can make painting feel like a chore instead of a joy. If that's been your experience, stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to know how to paint a likeness that feels alive, loose, and uniquely yours without sacrificing accuracy. And if you are finding that you just feel stuck in this struggle of tightness in your oil paintings, I'm here to help. I go even deeper into this process in my free on-demand webinar, where I will walk you through how to transform your portraits this year. The link's down in the description. Go ahead and check it out so you can save your seat. Let's get something out of the way. Yes, getting the likeness right in a portrait is really important. But if all you're doing is copying your photo and trying to match every mark you make down to each individual pixel in the photograph, well, you're missing the part that makes a portrait sing. You're missing the reason why we're painting in the first place and not just getting a print of our favorite photo. It's not about painting what the photo shows. It's about saying something beyond what the photo is saying. And in order to do that, you need to have more than just a reference. You need to have a vision. What changed everything for me in my journey, because I also grew up using things like drawing on the right side of the brain, or learning how to capture likeness using a grid. Or later on in the journey, I learned things like how to use a sight size approach, or how to use a proportional divider. But quickly I realized that this was a recipe for just feeling like a glorified camera and printer. What changed everything for me, though, was realizing that I didn't just need technical tools. I needed to know what kind of style I was pushing toward. And this isn't just something unique for me. This is true for every artist that I have worked with, too. And to illustrate why, let me tell you about Karen. So Karen built her career on tight, photorealistic portrait commissions, paintings that were so precise they looked like photographs. But when she finished a piece, she didn't even want to share it. She told me, "I took pictures of my last commission, and I don't even want to put them out there as something that I do." Karen and I first talked at Portrait Society this past year. She knew she wanted to break free from grids, from over measuring, from the rigid process that was sucking the joy out of art making for her. But she hesitated for 6 months. And then when she finally decided to go all in and actually get my help, everything changed. Within 1 month, she stopped using grids entirely. In 3 weeks, she had her first expressive, loose portrait. When we looked at it together, she was astonished that it was exactly the style that she wanted to embody with her work. And only a few months after that, she had a full body of work in her new style, with clients asking her for it. Now, she paints with confidence. She enjoys the process. And most importantly, she's finally making art that feels like her. She told me, "I was terrified to lose something I wasn't even liking anyway." And if that resonates with you, this might be your sign. That's why, before I start any major portrait now, I actually check in with my inspiration. Specifically, I've built an entire inspiration board. It's like a personal compass for what I want my painting to feel like. And not just one painting, but all of the work that I make. And this isn't just an inspiration board or a compass showing me any kind of art that I like. It's just showing me this is what I want to create. I'm going to be breaking down exactly how to build your inspiration board in that on-demand webinar. So make sure, if you haven't yet, that you go ahead and sign up. That way, I can help you to answer that same question of what it is that you are truly yearning to create. And that means ultimately that we can actually teach you how to not just say what photo says, we can teach you how to get your artistic voice onto the canvas over and over again. But for right now, let's talk about how this vision showed up for me in this particular painting. So it's important to note that I didn't dive in to this piece with just random brushwork. I knew what kind of energy I wanted in the marks that I was making. I wasn't just going off of a plain old photo reference or a candid that I just conveniently had sitting around on my iPhone. I was really selective in the reference that I chose. And not only was I selective in the photo, but I adjusted that photo reference before I got started so that the mood and the composition actually aligned with my stylistic goals. And I could look at my plan for this piece and know that it actually aligned with what I wanted to get onto canvas, what I want to say as an artist. And because I had that plan, I didn't need to just rely on translating the photograph. I didn't need to rely on a grid or a proportional divider in order to feel successful. Instead, I could use the combination of my photo reference, my inspiration, and then my mocked up version of that photo reference that marries the two to show me exactly where I was headed. And ultimately, it gives me permission to know how and where I can loosen up in this piece so that I don't have to feel beholden to those measuring tools in the first place. As a result, the marks that I put down on the canvas could flow from a place of clarity, not a place of control. I think so often, and in my experience, so often, painters are sticking with a grid because they don't know what they would put on canvas if they didn't just copy the photograph. And sometimes painters have this light bulb go off and they try to break free from the photograph by simply improvising, but that is really met with very unpredictable results. It's why we get this experience where one day you have a breakthrough painting and you think, oh my gosh, I've finally broken through. I've finally made it. I've arrived. The rest of my journey is going to feel so much different. And then you go into the studio the next day for the next painting, and it's like you have never painted before. That is not because you have backslid or maybe you just weren't cut out for this. It's simply because your success came through, well, kind of just chance. And one thing I really want to clarify, because I talk to so many painters who've had this experience, and they worry that maybe their good paintings only happened because they got lucky. I want to dispel that notion out of your head right now, because I cannot tell you how common this is, and it's just another way in which we experience creative self-sabotage. So here is why your best paintings are not just you getting lucky the way that you're imagining. When we think about this idea of, oh, maybe I just got lucky, or maybe it was just a fluke, what we're really thinking is, maybe I don't actually have the skill for this after all. Or maybe I'm just not cut out for it. Maybe I just don't have this kind of talent or this potential. But if that were actually true, well, okay, here's what it would look like if you actually just got lucky. You're walking through your studio, you have paint loaded onto brushes that you're just holding in your arms, and suddenly you trip and fall, and all of those loaded paint brushes just fall onto a canvas that you happen to have sitting on your floor, and suddenly, somehow, it just coalesced into this beautiful final product. I am willing to bet that that is not what has happened to you in the past. No, you had to actually have the skill to put down every mark that yielded your favorite or most successful painting that you have ever made. No one is coming to take that skill away from you, but you probably were able to make that particular painting because you were set up for success. And that is different. And sometimes, if you are just taking random stabs in the dark with your plan, you will have the planets align so that you are genuinely set up for success, which is great. The problem is that when we're just taking random stabs in the dark, we don't actually know what those variables are. So next time we go into a painting and we want to put our creative voice into it and we deviate off of our photo reference, we're just winging it, and a different set of circumstances coalesce around that painting, and it doesn't result in that magical moment where everything just comes together. Instead, it results in that painting that kind of looks like maybe a kindergartner made it. So those are all the essential pieces that set me up to create a likeness that felt alive in this particular piece. All of the steps that were essential before I actually started to put paint to canvas. Now, if you're watching this video, chances are you are actually pretty darn good at capturing a likeness. If I give you a grid, or if I give you a really nice reference photo to work off of, and you have the right tools and enough time, you can get a really accurate result. So chances are I don't have to sit you down and explain various exercises to help you improve your proportions or improve the accuracy of your drawing. But that is nonetheless a really critical aspect of what set me up for success in this particular piece. And this is true for artists like Karen as well. When she first started working with me, it had been years since she had actually worked on a portrait that wasn't reliant on a grid in order to capture the likeness. So one of the first things we really needed to do for her was to really talk through and understand together what role the grid was playing so that I could prescribe some exercises specifically for her to help prove that she didn't need it. Now, these exercises look different for every person because everyone is using these tools for slightly different reasons, and they're bringing in different levels of comfort with different strategies for getting the portrait onto canvas. I'm going to be talking through a whole range of these drawing exercises to help you capture the likeness in that on-demand webinar. But to give you a brief overview of what was really successful for me personally, let me go ahead and break down those exercises so that you can not only understand what set me up for success on this piece as far as my planning, but you also can understand what set me up for success in terms of how I'm actually putting the marks down on canvas in a way that it looks like the person that I'm trying to paint. Or to put it a slightly different way, I've already walked you through what allowed me to capture the style or get the life into the painting. Now let's talk about how I got the likeness or the accuracy in the painting. What I have found to be most impactful in my journey is to have a combination of being able to work through the likeness in a freehand approach while checking the likeness in a way that gives me really clear, objective, irrefutable feedback. Now, that's kind of an abstract way of describing it, so let me elaborate. Basically, what this boils down to is I need a way to be able to put the marks onto the canvas in a way where I'm not worrying about being super duper tight and accurate. I'm not sticking with a grid. I'm not reliant on a tracing or a pencil drawing underneath or a projection. I can just go in straight with paint on a bare canvas and trust that I will get the likeness. So that is one piece of this, that in one sense, I'm pretty unrestrained. But part of the reason why I can do this so comfortably is that I know I have a really easy way to double check the accuracy of what I'm doing. The advantage of this is that after I've been working on the portrait for a little while, I can compare what I've put down to my plan for this piece, and I can tell down to the millimeter if something is accurate or if it's off. This is one piece of painting that I find is just so unnecessarily difficult and frustrating. If we use the analogy of playing an instrument, for example, it is really clear if you are learning a piano piece, for instance, let's say you're learning like a Bach prelude, and if you know how that piece of music is meant to sound, it's really clear the second that you hit a wrong note. But in painting, we don't really get that same phenomenon. We don't have a clear like, oof, that mark was in the wrong place, or ooh, her eyebrow, that is way too far up, or her eyes aren't symmetrical. We only really have that moment much later in the painting, and oftentimes, not only is the feedback not immediate, that is, it takes time for us to recognize that an error has occurred, we also don't know just how wrong we are. Going back to the piano analogy, usually it's pretty easy to say, ooh, that was just a half step sharp, and you know what note you should have hit instead. Or you can just double check your sheet music to figure it out. But in painting, not only can it take us a good amount of time to figure out we've made a mistake, but it can be actually really difficult to pinpoint, all right, does the likeness look off because the left eye is too high or the right eye is too low? Or if the eyebrows are too far apart, are they too far apart by 10 millimeters? Or 3. And that can result in a lot of overworking that makes us feel way more comfortable if we're just working tighter, because it's really difficult to overwork something that is meant to be really tight. Whereas it's super easy to take something that was supposed to look really loose and expressive and quickly kill all the life in it because we are working it to death. So one strategy that I used in this painting that I have talked about on my YouTube channel before is actually taking photographs of the work in question and then comparing them directly with the mock-up so that I can see really clearly whether the drawing is actually in the right place or not. In that way, I can go in and know definitively, okay, the problem is in how far down the nose is coming. Or, oh, I accidentally shifted the entire portrait a little bit too far to the right, and I just need to make this one adjustment, and everything should click into place. But as you can imagine, this has just been one helpful piece of the puzzle on my journey. And I think it's probably the most important one. But regardless, I think it's really critical for us to understand what would be the most effective exercise for you to help you maintain the likeness without being overly reliant on something like a grid or a pencil underdrawing or a projector. And then we want to take this same thinking and apply it to your circumstances. For some students that I've worked with who've been overly reliant on a grid, we simply thought about taking baby steps to move away from it. So rather than having a really complex grid with a lot of squares in it, we slowly broke that grid down into maybe 4 quadrants overall. Or we just placed a dot in the center of the canvas to help ground everything. This was actually really helpful for another one of my students named Karen, who had been reliant on a grid for a really long time and within just months left the grid behind and didn't need it anymore. Now, for the Karen I've been talking about in the bulk of today's video, it was ultimately about getting her out of her own head. She had the chops to be able to really capture a likeness without needing that grid. But in her case, we needed to remove the pressure that commissions had put on her paintings and allow her to work on some portraits that were lower stakes and just for her. This actually served a number of different purposes. Not only did it allow her to work in a way that was more exploratory and put less pressure on there being a really great likeness in the final product, it also allowed her to explore her style a little bit more because she realized that she could afford to mess up the likeness, or she could afford to try something new stylistically and have it not come out successfully every single time. It's really difficult to take off that kind of pressure when you are under a commission deadline. So for her, we simply had to make this one adjustment, and quickly she proved to herself just what she was capable of, both in terms of breaking free of the grid and in terms of being able to move her style in the direction she was actually excited about, thus enabling her to get the life into the likeness of her portrait without sacrificing the looseness or her sense of personal style. But I know for me, when I finally stopped obsessing over likeness alone and I started to follow this process to build portraits that actually felt like me, that's when everything changed. That's when I was able to start getting portrait commissions that allowed me to build my business and ultimately get to paint full time. And I'm not just proud of the likeness anymore. I'm proud of the paintings that I make as a whole. And that's what I want for you too. If this is the kind of breakthrough that you're after, make sure you watch the on-demand webinar where I guide you through this full process step by step right after this video. From building out your inspiration board to planning your reference and your brushwork and actually figuring out what the exercises need to look like for you to build up the skills you need for your style. Well, this is the roadmap that helped me and hundreds of my students make that exact leap. Click the link in the description to watch it now and let me know in the comments what part of your process feels the most frustrating right now. I would love to speak to that in a future video. Until then, I hope you enjoy the webinar and happy painting.